So welcome to this podcast on Holy Week, which we are approaching. Sometimes people ask, well, what is Holy Week and why does the church spend so much time and energy keeping it and having services through it? And we thought it would be a good idea to have our Precentor Kathryn here to talk us through it so that we get a better sense of the whole. So Kathryn, hello.
Hello.
Take us through then Holy Week.
Okay, so just being really practical, Holy Week is that time of year when we revisit the last week of Jesus' life leading up to the crucifixion and then beyond that to the resurrection. And it really matters because within the different services of the week, we all get a chance to enter into the story, to make it more our own, so that becomes real for us and we really have a sense of travelling with him.
And of course liturgy has a historic relationship with theatre and you really get this sense, don't you, in Holy Week. It's quite theatrical, but we're playing our part in it.
We really are. One of my favourite questions often with scripture is, where are you in the story? And that sounds very loudly in my ears during Holy Week. I remember talking to one of our musicians at Coventry Cathedral on Maundy Thursday after we'd had the big service, which I'll tell you all about in a minute or two, but I was going downstairs and he looked at me and he just said, "You're really in the story now, aren't you?" And that's what it's all about from where I am.
Great. So Holy Week starts on Palm Sunday.
It does indeed. And if we were doing a sort of a diagram, a graph of Holy Week, Palm Sunday would be one of the high points. So we remember Jesus coming into Jerusalem, riding on a donkey, lots of excited crowds because it's a holiday and they think that this is going to be the beginning of a revolution. Jesus has said some radical things. They know that he's already upset the authorities a bit and they're expecting that he will fulfill all their dreams for liberation, that he will be the one who will lead them away from the Roman Empire and back to being an independent nation. And so they start cheering and celebrating, and there are no flags available, so they pull branches off palm trees and they wave their cloaks around and they make a path. It's a very steep track down into Jerusalem. And Jesus is on a donkey, which is a bit surprising for a conquering hero. And having walked that track, the thought of doing it on a donkey is absolutely terrifying. It's very steep, very slippery. So I'm hoping that palm branches and cloaks made it actually easier for the donkey, who must have been terrified in the middle of it all.
But I love donkeys.
Yes, I love donkeys. So I love the fact they turn up at crucial moments in the Christian story as well. But in all this excitement, in the centre of it, here is Jesus, who's not going to be fulfilling their hopes and dreams as they imagine, but yet it's his arrival as the king they're expecting.
So what do we do to enact that?
Well, some places have a donkey, and I've yet to achieve this particular ambition, but we will have palm branches and palm crosses, which are made from dry palm leaves and really don't give you much of a sense of joyous celebration, but they're what we have and have become a tradition in their own rights.
Because palm trees are big and they're very green, aren't they?
Very green and joyous. I mean, you can imagine being excited about waving a large quantity of palm leaf around. In the medieval church, they used willows.
Yes.
And I think that would have a better sense of joy and of taking what's to hand than the crosses and the palm branches that we use now. But they've become a tradition in their own right, and the crosses are blessed at the beginning of the service. Each member of the congregation is given one, and they'll take them home, and you'll see throughout the year a palm cross stuck behind a picture frame. They become a little symbol. I was there. I was part of the story that day.
And then they're used again, aren't they?
They are.
As Lent approaches.
Absolutely, yes.
Tell us what happens.
Yes, so if this palm cross makes it right through the year, then just before Ash Wednesday, people bring them back into their churches and they're burned to make the ash with which we receive the reminder that we're mortal, we're only here for a while, we're dust.
So we begin outside and we process round the cathedral and then into the cathedral.
That's right.
And then in the service, there's a long reading. Tell us about that.
There's a very long reading. So we hear the account from one of the Gospels of the whole of Jesus's trial and passion. In fact, we often start on Maundy Thursday night at the end of the Last Supper with Jesus going out with his friends, promises that nobody would ever let him down. They are there to the end. And then the moment when the soldiers arrive and his friends scatter, and we hear all of the passion narrative, the story of Jesus' trial, the story of his journey to the cross and the crucifixion, which we'll be hearing again in more detail as the week goes on. So it sort of sets out the stall for the week. It also means that as people don't always manage to be with us on every night of Holy Week, they know where the story's going. If they come back on Good Friday, they'll have had a sense of what's happened leading up to that point. And if they're going to be away for Easter and they've forgotten what happens at all, they just have to hang on, because we don't tell them about Easter Sunday. The Passion Gospel on Palm Sunday ends with Jesus' death and the world waiting on the edge of its seat.
And we have, this year, we have Bishop Rob Wickham, who's going to be preaching through the week, and he begins on Palm Sunday to evensong.
He does indeed, yes. And his perspectives on the week are taken from the question of where you're sitting in the story. So again, it's a bit, where are you in the story? He's calling the week a Game of Thrones.
So looking at seats as they appear in the story, it's fascinating.
Yes, and when you're flawed as well, that's one of his moments.
Okay, so then that's Sunday. Then we go into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, yes, where there isn't a particular liturgy for each day. There are different emphases. We hear about Mary of Bethany pouring her precious oil over Jesus' feet. We hear about Judas on Spy Wednesday doing his dodgy deal with the authorities and agreeing to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. And those will be reflected in the readings of the Eucharist for those days.
And Bishop Rob...
Bishop Rob is speaking at Compline.
At Compline on each day.
And that is lovely, because we have this sense throughout the week, I guess, that the darkness is gathering. So it's good to be in that evening service with a bit of space to reflect. Again, to have more of a sense perhaps of the whole of the week, rather than worrying about, oh, it's Monday, this is the Monday story. And musically, we're using some very beautiful settings of the Lamentations of Jeremiah, which talk about desolation and loss. Reflecting initially on Jerusalem, which is really very powerful and poignant this year.
And of course, doing it at that time of day, we are trying to seek our prayers as the light begins to fall, to fail, as it were, which is, of course, a prelude to what's coming.
Yes.
So then we go into Maundy Thursday, which is the day in the Gospels tell us about Maundy Thursday.
So Maundy Thursday is the day when Jesus had his Last Supper with his friends. So he gathered them together, and in some accounts it feels like a Passover meal, in others it's a meal together, and he takes the bread and blesses it and breaks it and shares it with them and says, "This is my body. Whenever you do this, remember me," and the subtext is, "and I will be with you." And then does that again with the cup of wine, very, very Passover, sharing the cup of wine, the cup of blessings, all of that stuff, and says, "This is my blood." In one of the Gospels, he makes them drink the cup first and then tells them that it's his blood, which must have been shocking, even more shocking than the words themselves. We hear them framed by centuries of liturgy and we think, oh yes, of course we know exactly what we mean, although we don't really. But imagine sitting around that table and this person that you love breaks the bread and says, "This is my body." What that must have felt like. Before he even got to that part of the evening, though, he'd already shocked them, because he was their leader, their teacher, their rabbi, the one that they looked up to, and yet he chose to do the most menial thing that he could think of, which was to wash their feet. We're in a hot, sweaty country, feet are dusty and grubby, and washing feet was a really important precursor to feeling comfortable in the evening.
But tended to be done by
the servant.
Yeah. So
exactly.
That's why it's shocking.
Yep. And they found that very hard to take. Peter says, "No, you can't do that." And Jesus says to him, "Well, if you don't let me do this, you're not letting me serve you. You're not part of who I am and what we're doing together." And so then Peter, whom I'm very fond of because he's all or nothing, says, "Oh, wash the whole of me. Wash my hands, wash my feet, wash the lot." And Jesus says, "No, the feet will be enough."
And I'm always conscious in society about how often feet are used to point to our human identity. So often if they want to show a fetus in the womb, they'll show you its foot, little foot, because it's recognizable. Yes. And then if you watch these crime mysteries, the one bit we're allowed to see of the corpse is the foot.
Yes.
And in some respect, they are a bit like us. They get hardened over time and a bit dirty. And, they have a journey which can be easy or not. So feet are a funny sort of part of us, aren't they?
Yes, and terribly kind of private as well, somehow.
Yes.
Within the liturgy, we try and recreate that experience of 12 people having their feet washed.
Yes.
And finding 12 people in a huge congregation is really challenging. People will say, I don't know, I haven't had a pedicure for weeks, and things like that. Yes. And there's a lot of people feverishly washing their feet before they have their feet washed. I think we like to feel that we're ready always, and maybe part of what's happening there is that we aren't ready to receive what we're being offered by Jesus.
And of course, in the liturgy in the evening, the person who's presiding, which is this year me, will be washing the feet in memory of that night. And I am sure you feel the same, but when you do that, it's almost overwhelming.
It's extraordinary. It really is. And feet tell so many stories. I had a wonderful reader in my first parish who had been told as a child she wouldn't walk. She had 2 club feet, and she'd had extensive surgery. She was in her 80s by this point, and washing her feet and knowing the pain with which she walked day by day and all the miles that she had done in serving other people undid me every year.
Tell us about the end of that service, because something unusual happened.
It does, yes. So we've had a communion service, so we've done exactly what he told us. We have broken bread and shared wine in memory of him. But then at the end of the Last Supper, Jesus left the upper room where they were having their meal and went off to Gethsemane, and everything, the disciples will presumably somebody would have tidied up the room behind him. What we do is we take the consecrated bread, we take a piece of the consecrated bread which represents Jesus for us, and we take it away from the altar where we've been celebrating the Eucharist, away from where we've all been sitting, and we take it into a side chapel which becomes the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus spent the night praying, wishing that he didn't have to go through what he knew lay ahead of him. And his friends were rubbish. They'd all said, "We'll stay awake, we'll stay with you to the bitter end, we will do all of that," and had made extravagant promises which we hear in the story that we hear on Maundy Thursday as our gospel, and they fell asleep. And they kept falling asleep. Jesus kept coming back to them. Couldn't you watch for an hour? Couldn't you manage it? Yes, Lord, of course we could. And back to sleep they go. And finally, the soldiers come to arrest him and the disciples bolt. So we follow him to this side chapel, which has become Gethsemane, which will be full of light and flowers and beauty. a good place in which to spend the night. And we watched with Jesus, and we managed to watch till 10 here, which will be a stretch for many of us. I'm comforted always by the fact that Jesus doesn't say, I need you to be totally switched on. He just says, could you be there? And we're there. And that matters to me. And at 10 o'clock, that watch, as it's known, will end. And the altars have been stripped in the cathedral while this is happening. It's become a shell of itself, so all the beautiful hangings, all the beauty that we enjoy the rest of the year is either shrouded or removed. And it's a shell of itself. The sacrament is taken into another side chapel. In some churches, in fact in a church that I served, that the sacrament was consumed at the end of the watch, so there was nothing to make it a church until we began to proclaim the resurrection on Holy Saturday night. But here we will take Jesus represented in the bread and put him safely to one side, and that will be the bread that we use on Good Friday when we focus on his body fully broken on the cross.
One of the most powerful endings of a watch that I was ever at was at midnight. They did it through to midnight. And it ended by the parish priest coming in and throwing down on the floor 30 pieces of silver.
Yes.
And you just heard this crash of the coins, and then he locked the church. It was a very, very sort of dramatic ending. Okay, so we've now come to the end of Thursday. Tell us about Friday. What is Good Friday, first of all? So
Good Friday is the day when we remember that Jesus died on the cross. And Good Friday is a corruption of God's Friday. It's the day when the world changed. When you're looking at it as a spectator, it doesn't look like Good Friday at all. When my children were small, we used to call it the saddest day of all. And that sense that all of the grief and pain and awfulness of the world is concentrated on the figure of Christ on the cross. So a cross will be brought in, and we'll hear the ancient reproaches. We imagine Jesus speaking to us. What more could I have done? All these things I've done to try and build our relationship, to show you how much I love you, and you've just turned away. Oh, my people, what have I done for you? Answer me. We hear that sung. It's searing emotionally, because there is so much within it that resonates with our own consciousness of how we try and fail again and again.
And we start the liturgy by lying. The ministers lie down, don't they? And they prostrate, which I always find bittersweet, because that's what I did when I was ordained a priest. And you become very aware not only of your sorrow on the day, the privilege of being a priest, the mess up you've made of it since then. It all sort of comes back at you in one simple gesture of just lying flat down. Yeah, absolutely. And then I mean, we're made in bodies. We need to be people who embody what we're feeling. Yes. We do it all through life, don't we? But on Good Friday, we do it collectively. So that opportunity to come and kiss the cross or touch the cross, whatever feels appropriate, is extraordinarily powerful. And you don't know that unless you've done it. No. It's not a spectator sport. And, you know, those people who are going to come on Good Friday, I would encourage them to come up to the cross and to reverence it in any way they wish, whether that is a touch or just a nod, or but to be part of that. It's something you can't really voice easily. No, indeed. Though I think there is something, even if you're not able or choose not to, watching all these people, young and old. Last year we had an extraordinarily small child toddling along with everybody else and then doing what everybody else had done. And
whatever else we understand or don't understand about the cross, we believe it was for everybody. So that's a really powerful underlining of that.
And we see, don't we, on the Friday, what happened in bread, that it was broken and given, and that's exactly now what happens to the body that we now think about on the cross. And we keep a 3-hour devotion, don't we? An hour and a half at our cathedral, an hour and a half is with Bishop Rob, with some reflections, and then the second hour and a half is the liturgy.
The liturgy, yes.
And those 3 hours are the hours that Jesus traditionally was on the cross for.
Yes, which is really a long time, actually. And we become quite Mediterranean, don't we? Actually, people come and go on Good Friday. They wander in and they take as much as they can take. Yeah. And that's great, actually, that's absolutely fine.
Yes. Yes, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me with our world as it is at the moment, where we are observers of suffering every day on the news and so on, that some people won't be able to take much of it because we're overloaded.
Yeah.
And for some people it might actually be very cathartic and be an expression of some deep pain that lies at the heart of the world at the moment.
Yes.
So,
yes. It's interesting you mentioning how it connects you back to your ordination, because I almost think on Friday priesthood doesn't matter. It's not a day when I feel that I'm responsible for ministering to anybody. I'm just there on my knees.
Yeah, with everyone else.
With everyone else, yes. And I think that feels quite important as well, actually.
And the prayer reflects that a bit, because it says, look upon this, your family.
Yes.
We're all in the family. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So Saturday, I mean, when I was a child, Saturday was the day we all got our dustpans and brushes and went
Holy
off.
dusters.
Holy dusters and went off.
Absolutely, yes.
Because this was traditionally the day the church got a good clean.
Yes, because it's not a church in lots of ways. The sacrament is not present. Everything has been stripped out. It's, you imagine a world without God in it. And the church is reflecting that. So yes, it's the day for spring cleaning and little old ladies up ladders and feather dusters wherever you look. It's fun. It's a very good community building day.
But then in the evening, what happens?
So reflecting on the Jewish tradition that a feast begins the evening before.
Yeah.
As dusk falls, we'll gather in the churchyard and a fire will be lit. And from that fire, the great Easter candle is lit as a symbol of the life and light of Christ coming back into the world at the resurrection. And the bishop who will be presiding has this wonderful prayer that he will use as he puts grains of incense into this great candle, which, in a cathedral, it's 3 foot high at least, and it will be used throughout the year at baptisms and at funerals, at important moments. But for this moment, he's saying, Christ, the Alpha and the Omega, all times and all seasons belong to him, and marks this candle with 5 grains of incense to reflect Christ's 5 wounds. And then it's carried into the darkened cathedral, and as it's carried in, we sing the light of Christ, thanks be to God. And gradually the candles of the congregation are lit so that what had been a completely dark shell becomes this place that's full of light and joy. And then we have the great Easter proclamation of the Exultet, sing choirs of angels, he's alive. Christ has risen, sound the trumpets of salvation. Wonderful, ancient words. And you always feel when you're singing it as if you're the first person who has ever sung it in the world. It feels as if you're doing it for all time. So that's very special.
And the Easter candle is carried up the aisle in exactly the same way the cross had been.
Yes, indeed.
Which I always think captures a really important theological point about resurrection. Because if you look in the Gospels, Jesus does not take on a sort of Merlin the wizard or some mystic Meg figure. He simply revisits the places he'd been. an upper room,
Yes.
a beach, his disciples' company. And he says, you know, I used to be here with you, and I still am.
Yeah.
I still am.
Absolutely.
And so when you get that candle in exactly the same place that the
Yes.
cross had been, I always...
Yes, and with a very similar response, because on Good Friday we say to the congregation, behold the wood of the cross, and they respond, come let us worship.
Yeah.
And then on Holy Saturday, it's the light of Christ, thanks be to God, but in similar vein as we carry it in. And the cross was gradually unveiled on Good Friday, and as the light spreads, of course, the reality of the community is unveiled and shown again.
And we're wanting people to bring bells? Are we?
I would love people to bring bells, because having sung this great exultet and a lovely bit about the bees who've made the candle, which I enjoy singing, particularly as we can, you know, focus on the importance of bees as a sign of health for the world. After that, the bishop will say, Alleluia, Christ is risen. And we will all respond, he is risen indeed, Alleluia. And then the organ will go mad, and then we will be ringing bells, and anyone who's got bells to ring, please bring them, because it's an explosion of joy before the choir launches into the Gloria, which we won't have sung all the way through for many and many a long day.
So if you've got a cowbell knocking around at home, bring it along.
Yes, jingle bells that you found at the bottom of a toy cupboard from when there was a toddler. The lot. Yes, yes.
And then the bishop will also do something else at this service, because we have, 20 people coming?
Apparently not quite as many as that in the end, but we've got several people coming to be confirmed.
Okay.
So we will get a chance to renew our baptismal vows, to say we are confirming joyously that we are part of this great family of faith. And then there are various parishes who have sent members of their congregation to be confirmed by the bishop, and we've got, I think, 5 from the Cathedral family.
Great.
Who are choosing to take that step of faith and own their faith for themselves.
Anything else about Saturday? I mean, by this stage, of course, clergy are starting to feel Holy Week, never mind keeping it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. No, I think that's about it.
And then we move Sunday morning.
Sunday morning is trumpets and glory and splendour and flowers and people in lovely new dresses saying, you know, it's Easter, we've made it. We've gone through the long, grey 40 days of Lent, which actually are nothing like as grey as they look when you're a small child. But we've done that together, and now we can celebrate together. So I'm hoping as a precentor for a really full cathedral with people singing their heads off. We've got wonderful hymns, we've got beautiful music, we've got trumpets, and everything that we can think of to celebrate the fact that actually death doesn't win, that love wins.
And the bishop will be taking the service. I think I'm preaching. The choir will be in full flow.
They will.
There'll be some refreshments after the service so that people can meet one another. And then Bishop Rob at Evensong will give his final address in his series.
Absolutely, yes. And we've got some lovely music to hold that as well. There's a very lovely anthem by Wesley called Blessed Be the God and Father, which is a real Easter Sunday celebration. And I know some people, you know, feel that they haven't had Easter if they haven't had it. So that's there to support his preaching at Evensong. And after that, we will all tumble into the nearest cave and sleep ourselves, I think.
My training vicar always used to open a bottle of champagne when it was all over, which he used to love, and sadly he died far too young, but I still try to keep that tradition. And I always toast his memory, because he taught me so much.
That's very lovely. Yes, yes.
And so ends Holy Week and Easter Day, but of course then we move into Eastertide, which is a wonderful season, I always think, in the church's calendar.
Yes, we can go on celebrating for 50 days.
50 days. And I mean, I know you well enough, I think, to say that this is a real sort of animating period, isn't it?
Yes.
You can't but enter into it.
Yes.
and you go up. I mean, I don't mean you, we go up and we go down, we go through. There's no way but through Holy Week.
Absolutely.
Thank you for taking us through this now, and we look forward very much, and we hope that lots of people will come and join us for this marvellous time. Thanks, Kathryn.
Thank you.